Because I think what the Trump trade deal is the first significant effort in recent years to improve the operating environment in the UK for the pharmaceutical sector.
We have seen this tripling of spend on health since the 1950s. It looks as though it may double again in the next 50 years.
Without healthy people, we cannot be productive. We have more than 50 clinical trials here in the UK. We invest £10 million every year in R&D.
We are often cited as slow at adopting new technologies and then spreading them across the NHS.
If we don't support the people who are trying to make returns from the life sciences sector, we shouldn't be surprised if those returns go elsewhere.
That's where I think the diversity of thinking could help, where we bring life sciences and the farm industry and together with the government to make it happen.
We have had additional friction between the NHS and pharmaceutical companies inserted into their dialogue over the last 10, 15 years or so.
I have observed the absolutely fantastic innovation over the past couple of decades, which has been totally transformative in some cancers.
We are here committed to invest in the UK, and we hope we can get a good partnership to make it happen for the benefit of all UK patients.
Voices of Care, the healthcare podcast.
Successive governments have claimed that life sciences and healthcare can drive economic growth. But are we unlocking that potential properly? My three expert guests today are going to help me answer that question. They are Maria Tereno, the UK country manager for Boehringer Ingelheim, celebrated CEO of the King's Fund, Sarah Woolnough. Last but not least, Bill Morgan, who is the managed senior partner at Newmarket Strategy and advisor to two government administrations. Welcome to Voice of Care, and thanks for making your time today.
Great to be here.
Bill, I'm going to kick off with you, as you're the political man from the background. Life sciences, I guess the last few months, it's been a case of Trump trade deals and tariffs, dare I say, that seem to have dominated the headlines.
Yeah, and I think that will continue for the foreseeable future. I think what the Trump trade deal is the first significant effort in recent years to improve the operating environment in the UK for the pharmaceutical sector, which I think is a sort of necessary development to support the life sciences sector in the UK. I don't think it's a sufficient development. I think there's lots still to do under the bonnet. I think persuading the Treasury that this is something worth investing in is still not a done deal. And I think in certain parts of the sort of public policy landscape, there is this bias against the commercial aspects of the life sciences sector, which I think needs to be resolved if we're really to unlock the potential of the sector.
Well, we'll dig into some of those details. Maria, I'll give you a very belated congratulations to your appointment and your relocation to the UK. So it's an exciting time as well as a challenging one for Boehringer Ingelheim.
Yes, definitely. I'm obviously very glad to be here. I've been in the UK since 3 months, with Boehringer 22 years, and in life sciences, healthcare industry, more than 25 years. Boehringer, as you know, is among the largest pharmaceutical companies globally, among the top 20, but it's a family-owned company. And for me, it's amazing because the company plans in generations, plans in the long term, and that's what is my passion. And I've seen life sciences and the scientific development of therapies in the last 20 years, progressively, impressively. So it's great to be here in the UK, which is also caring for research and development, a wonderful hub for scientific work, and I'm here to be.
Well, we look forward to getting some more. We have to do a separate podcast on the history of Boehringer Ingelheim.
For sure.
141 years. It's fascinating. Sarah, welcome back.
Great to be here.
Putting the context for this, the two government missions, health, economic growth, I mean, they've been thrown into relief in terms of how important that is. I think Sarah Arnold, your colleague, wrote a brilliant piece recently highlighting how health budgets have grown from 2.8% of GDP to 8.3%, something like that. And we now have to tackle this challenge because otherwise it's going to carry on growing. And life sciences, we've had a plan 6 months ago, etc., sits at the centre of that.
Indeed. Well, the mission language has kind of quickly gone out of fashion, but the challenge remains. And if you think of a couple of the really big ticket strategies that the government has published over the past year, we have had, of course, the 10-year health plan and then the life sciences sector plan. And they do attempt, at least in strategy terms, to really closely knit together our ambitions to deliver a 21st century fit-for-purpose health service with a thriving life sciences sector, shifting the environment so that it's more favourable to growth and improved health. So that's point one. I mean, of course, there's a line that really sticks out to me in the life sciences sector plan, which is policy ideation has been good, delivery has been poor. So as ever, the challenge is delivering the strategy. But just on the point you raised up front, I think there is a growing socialisation of this narrative around health and wealth, brought into sharp relief recently because of the number of working age people out of the workforce.
3 million approximately.
Yeah, well, about 2.5 million, and then 3 million in work with a health limiting condition. So it's a massive issue. Treasury are worried, and so they should be. And so this narrative, which is to improve health, we must really think about the longer term trajectory of how much we're spending. We must think about prevention, and we must think about encouraging people back into the workforce or keeping them in the workforce. So knitting health and wealth together. Perhaps a theme that feels more on the surface of some of the public policy debates than has previously been.
And the plan, we're not going to go into the detail of all of it, but the life sciences plan talks about attracting capital, a place where someone can grow and scale, an organisation driven by data and leveraging data and innovation. I guess that's language that Boehringer Ingelheim will be very happy to see, at least on paper.
Yes, definitely. And that's exactly our paper, what our paper talks about, healthy returns. It's exactly about the link between health investment and economic growth. Yeah. And that's Boehringer is driving innovation. And I think that's the way to bring innovation to the country. And one thing about the paper is highlighting the importance of the OBR in this situation, because the OBR, as we all know, they independently assess the economic outlook of the UK, and productivity is part of that assessment. And without healthy people, we cannot be productive. And the paper, there is a very nice example in the paper where the OBI in autumn 23 assessed that if there was an increase in NHS funding for talking therapies in mental health, it would result in an increased employment of about 10,000 people by 2028, with some savings in welfare systems. So that's, for me, that's an example that shows that it can be done. We can try to create that relationship between health and welfare for the long-term benefit of the country.
Now that seems like a very compelling thesis. We're going to come back to the detail of how we actually get that done.
Yeah.
Bill, you've been up close and personal to Treasury decision making and the internal workings of government, good, bad and ugly. Just to expand upon that OBR paper that was published, I think, at the end of 2025, that's going to be really important, because tying economic growth to the bigger plans that you've talked about is something that, I hate to remind you, but this is not a new thing. There have been previous life science plans and visions going back to, I think, your time in the administration.
Yeah, no, and probably long before then as well.
I'm just giving you the last 15 years. We don't want to go too far back.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as I said earlier, I think persuading the Treasury that investing in health has an economic benefit, and investing in the life sciences sector and supporting the life sciences sector, both directly and through extra investment in health, that's that's what we need to see in order to support the life sciences sector overall. And the Treasury are not persuaded by that argument. And actually, they're still not persuaded even now, because we've seen in the UK-US deal that they're not putting their hand in their own pocket to fund it. They're asking the NHS to do that.
Yes.
Which creates all sorts of political challenges for the NHS and for governments in order, in sort of arguing for that deal to be implemented. And what the Healthy Returns paper sort of crystallizes in a very important way is the way in which we can help the Treasury to see that this investment can deliver economic growth.
And the idea that we're going to get into the detail, that the idea of this nexus between Treasury, life sciences and cross-departmental thinking. I mean, Darzi does hint at that in terms of his report over 2 years ago around the idea that actually it should be an engine of growth. We've had Jeremy Hunt here on arguing for the same thing in his new book. So this has now become much further up the political agenda.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's very easy to grasp, isn't it? If you invest in services to keep people in work, then you grow the economy. If you invest or if you support the life sciences sector and encourage him with investment, then you grow, highly skilled, high productivity jobs. And by the way, the life sciences sector is very, it's a very important sector because it's spread all over the country.
Yep.
So much of our growth is dependent on London and the South East. And yes, the Golden Triangle is still really important in life sciences, but there's bases in the Northwest, in South Wales, in Edinburgh, Glasgow, it's all over the country. So it's such an important sector to nurture and encourage. But it does need that support from government in order to reach its potential.
Sarah, just flesh out for us, the King's Fund produced a brilliant piece of work really looking at life sciences and the challenges. Just take us through the life sciences plan, just high level, the real effort. They're focusing on a couple of key areas or 6 key areas that underpin it: data, innovation, and supporting attracting capital into the country.
Yeah, so the life sciences sector plan talks about the UK's historic strengths, a real strength in basic science and R&D, but where we have traditionally fallen down is commercializing. And then that's often where great innovations in earlier stages of development, move offshore, get commercialized elsewhere, and we don't see the full benefits to UK PLC. I mean, that's that very short summary. So the plan does talk about, ways in which we can get at more capital to try and encourage and keep innovators in the UK. It then also goes on to talk about another sort of perennial problem, which is slower NHS uptake and adoption. So we often talk about, well, we should have fantastic advantages, single payer health system, great data comparable to some other health systems if we can get at it in the right way, obviously appropriately safeguarded. But we are often cited as slow at adopting new technologies and then spreading them across the NHS. Obviously not great for citizens and patients if they don't get access to new innovations. Also not good for the life sciences sector. I mean, this is an analysis that is well worn. We've known of these issues, but the life sciences sector plan, and then interestingly, the 10-year health plan really does put this agenda front and centre. And the 5 big bets that the health plan talks about: wearables, robotics, genomics, data, and AI. As being a way that will improve the experience and quality of care for patients, will drive up productivity of the NHS and in turn nurture a life sciences sector.
And I think if we pan out a little bit now, just to set the scene, so thank you to all of you. We've talked about the life sciences sector. Bill, take us a little bit through that. I mean, its economic significance. It's one of the key areas in terms of the industrial strategy. Huge employer in the UK, massive contributor to GDP.
Yeah, absolutely enormous. And as I said just now, it is spread around the country. It is, to coin a phrase, it is an important sector to help with levelling up.
Yep. That's a phrase I haven't heard for a while.
Indeed. Yeah, it is therefore something. It is therefore a sector which we really need to champion. There's some big national champions we have. We've got unique strengths in the NHS and the ability of the NHS or the potential of the NHS to work with the life sciences sector and support it. To pick up on a point Sarah just made about this distinction where we're good in early stage research and less so with the commercialization, because it links to my earlier point. So there's this bias against the commercial aspects of the life sciences sector. And it's something I saw a lot in government. I think if you were to simplify, there's sort of two people, if you like, who get a drug into patients. There's one person who invents the drug, and then there's the other person who spends £1 billion bringing that drug to market.
Yeah.
And of those two people, the person who should get the lion's share of a reward for bringing that drug to market is the person who spent the £1 billion on it, because they're the person who took all the risk in doing so. And I think in public policy, there's just this, and I don't know whether it's a British cultural thing, but there's this tendency to support the creator rather than the person who commercializes it. And yes, that's very important. But I think we sort of overdo the extent to which the early stage is supported and perhaps underbake the extent to which the commercialization is supported. And if we don't support the people who are trying to make returns from the life sciences sector, we shouldn't be surprised if those returns go elsewhere.
Well, on that point, obviously we're aware in 2025 some very large global players in the pharma sector decided to stop expansion. They were planning in London and other parts of the UK for that very reason. Sir John Bell, very well-known academic, made it clear that in his conversations, they felt that the UK was uninvestable. I mean, that was the reported thing. This is a sort of conversation that's taking place globally. I mean, obviously, you've been able to see the whole picture from a global perspective. The UK under pressure to attract the latest innovation.
Yes, definitely. I mean, this is on the top of the agenda of our corporate center and globally at Boehringer Ingelheim. And of course, I mean, being here and seeing the UK-US trade deal, I mean, of course, we welcome that. We see some positive, actions coming up, like the nice thresholds or the investment in health in medicines in next years. But it's still, like you said, Sarah, the commercialization part is very critical to enable access to patients to innovation. So the company invests 20, 30 years, like oncology. We've been investing in the last 30 years in oncology pipeline. If you look at oncology 10 years ago or 15 years ago, there was basically one type of treatment, and innovation brought so much development in treating cancer patients. Today, depending on the cancer type, you can cure, due to that innovative approach. But if you don't have the value and the compensation for all these investments that the company puts, it's very, very difficult for the company to say, I'm going to continue to invest in the UK. Although we continue to do so, but like you said, it cannot be sustainable. Yeah, so at one point there is a thinking, how much could we invest in the UK compared to the investments in other markets, and this is a decision that the company is well aware of.
Right. Well, that's going to be right in the front of mind for politicians, because the Life Sciences Plan makes very bold ambitions to be the leading life sciences economy in Europe by 2030 and the third most important globally by 2035 after the US and China. They're very, very big goals. So let's go back to, I'm going to quote Bill at you, because when Bill was here last, he said the NHS needs to be a good customer for the life sciences, and it really isn't in his own inimitable words. How are we going to make that happen? Because your paper that talked about making it much more commercially agile for innovation to not just be regulatorily approved, but also to make it financially, the incentives to be strong enough for pharma companies to invest.
Well, in a way, I mean, we've got the plans. I think the plans crystallize years of discussion. The life sciences sector plan, took a while to come together. Lots of great experts that you would expect were involved in formulating it. And you, as I said up front, you do have this knitting together of the health plan and the life sciences plan. So it's all about the delivery. What I would say, a few things, the health service has got rather a lot on its plate. And as we know, any system, any organisation can only have so many priorities. If you follow the trail back, what are the priorities at the moment? Well, they go all the way back, to the very heart of government, to the Prime Minister, getting waiting lists down, that retail offer that politicians made, access to primary care, elective waits, A&E. Every day we read about things like, patients in corridors in hospitals. So I think this is, it's really interesting. Bill makes the point about sort of deeply rooted cultural hesitancy when it comes to rewarding those that are commercialising. There is a very clear sense of prioritisation in the NHS, which is often about, the burning platform of the moment, that shorter term. And we've had this legacy of, therefore, delay in fixing some of the more fundamental, transformative, for the longer term issues, of which I would include this. And if we're going to be constructive and cup half full, I would say, well, we need to be laser focused on delivery against some of the commitments that the life sciences sector made. You take one as an example, set up time for clinical trials. So we have long talked about the fact that it takes too long. Exactly. So we've got a very clear blueprint of how we should ensure setup time is shortened, and that is really key to how competitive we are to, where companies might choose to run clinical trials. Can we deliver on it? Can we make it enough of a priority and in as many centres as possible so that it does drive a shift? You've got lots of good people on this. And you've got the regulators, I think, catching up with what needs to be done to make the market more competitive. So time will tell. I think just the final point I would make is on the money. And I do have sympathy with health bosses who are constantly told, you've got to manage your deficit. Essentially you'll get fired if you're not, hitting a financial target. Then no wonder they manage to the short term. No wonder they tend to take a different view on what's most important. So, kind of maturing the national conversation, which spans health and science and treasury, I think is what needs to happen, and sticking with it. None of this is an overnight fix. Plans are published. It's the hard yards of delivering them over the next few years that make the difference or not.
I'm going to come into the discussion paper and how that answers some of those questions in a moment, but I just want to tarry a little further on the way perhaps that some have argued that the life sciences sector may have declined a little bit here over the last few years. Now, your policy context, the autumn budget back in 25 did give a generous, relatively speaking, budget increase to the NHS, but it was 2.4% in real terms, which is less than the long-term average, and that's quite significant. And obviously, Lord Patrick Vallance has said the extra billion from the Trump is going to come out of the existing budget. So there's a tension there. But looking at the economic argument, just looking at life sciences, Bill, I think the numbers that I've seen are 10 years or et cetera ago, the proportion of the health budget that was spent on medicine was at 15%. It's now 9% in the UK against an OECD average of 14 to 20, depending on which country. So that's going to be quite important to have a way that more sales can be developed to make it an incentive for people to invest.
Yeah, and I think the link between the sort of UK commercial environment, how much you spend on medicines, and the link between inward investment by pharmaceutical companies, that's quite a sort of unclear link. But I think it's fair to say, if you look at the trend over the last 10, 15 years or so, and certainly in the last couple of years, there is a point at which the commercial environment becomes so tricky in the UK that the UK just looks bad for global boardrooms seeking to invest, and then they don't invest. Or worse, they pull investments that they were otherwise making, which we've seen in the last couple of years. And this sort of more punitive commercial environment, it has developed over time. And we have had, additional friction between the NHS and pharmaceutical companies inserted into their dialogue over the last 10, 15 years or so. Things like commercial frameworks and, the budget impact. There's been developments which have made it harder to do business in the UK.
Right.
And have made the NHS not be a good customer, to the point we discussed earlier. And you need to address those elements of friction if we're to look like a better place to do business. And that's important.
And one of the encouraging things would be, we're not going to go into the technical detail, but there are now changes. The NICE have a criteria for new branded medicine as long as it costs a certain amount of money for a qualified, the adjusted life year.
Yeah.
It's a technical term, but extra year of healthy life. That's now going up, so it may potentially allow.
It allows
more.
it allows pharmaceutical companies to sell their drugs for more.
Yes.
So that should be a positive development for the life sciences sector, certainly, and for inward investment resulting from that.
Bit of budget tension though with the NHS.
To Sarah's point, again, if we're doing this to support economic growth, the Treasury needs to put its hand in its pocket to fund that. And what's happening by making the NHS cough up for this is that it's compromising the the sort of attitude of the NHS to the sector and the willingness of the NHS to work with the sector. So it's got drawbacks in how it's being implemented, but it is otherwise a good thing, and it does rectify some of that. Some of those developments over the past 10, 15 years where we have become more punitive. So it is a good step, but the execution needs to be thought about again.
Being fiscally cautious might be strategically short-sighted here.
Yeah, well, I think it's exactly to Bill's point that, you can understand, an NHS that's under severe pressure in performance terms and in financial terms, being asked to find extra billions to support this deal makes it harder for lots of system leaders to do their job. And there is a really important point about partnership, because this plays into this cultural hesitancy as well. But I've certainly experienced great partnerships between life science organisations, the health service, sometimes voluntary and community sector organisations as well. And often you really can make leaps forward in, responsibly and sensibly getting quicker access to new innovations and changing pathways of care, and some fantastic skills and capacity that life sciences organisations can have and willingly share with the NHS. This sort of compromise in terms of the execution of this deal arguably chills the environment a little bit for that sort of partnership. And I would argue, and the King's Fund has argued, we need more of these partnerships.
Yes.
And they're a good thing. And it's this kind of whole societal effort to improve health and speed up adoption and uptake.
Before we talk about the discussion paper, because I want to look at the bigger picture around economic growth, just one final point, because looking at the debate and looking at the policy papers, often the language that is used is always around cost. And I think that if you look at the investment side of things, I'm trying to draw out one element. Research and development, the life and sciences sector is a huge source of research and development. And I think Maria Boehringer Ingelheim spends a significant proportion of its revenues on research and development to the benefit ultimately of patient care and innovation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the company globally, Boehringer invests around 25% of the revenues. So last year, 6.2 billion euros. And in the UK, we are investing a lot because it's really very good developed research and development here. So we have more than 50 clinical trials here in the UK. We invest 10 million pounds every year in R&D. To your point, I mean, it's really advanced and very competitive compared to other markets. But and you mentioned one thing about partnerships, Sarah, which I love when you brought that, because that's one thing that is in the core of what we do. Because we plan in the long term, we have several partnerships with NHS. I'm proud to say, that, and we are trying to do that because we believe that by joining forces, that's the way we can address the most pressing issues to enable access to patients to innovation. Yeah. So of course, I think that's one of the things that the company is investing also in the UK long term with some of the partnerships. But again, if we don't address the topic of value and looking at medicines as an investment and not only as a cost, there will be a point that will not be sustainable. And it would be a pity because the country offers so much and has so many strengths.
Right, I think more than a pity. I think it's going to affect people's lives.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the discussion paper
Yeah.
that you mentioned earlier, and how the OBR can be persuaded when it is making an assessment of policy impacts on the economy, perhaps to be a bit more open. I think one of the things that the paper talked about, Bill, I'll come to you on that, is the criteria that's used in making decisions can be, without getting into too much technical detail, I know you like all that stuff, but to make that more transparent, I think was one of the key areas of discussion.
Yeah, I think the way that the OBR forms its judgments is quite a black box and could be improved. And I think the OBR is getting better in that respect anyway. So it's still a relatively young institution. It's only
2010.
15 years old or so. So its processes will develop. I think the key thing in that paper though was that government departments need to get better at thinking through what programs they can spend money on which boost economic growth. Whether that's in respect of the Department of Health, certain healthcare programs, or certain investments in the life sciences sector, government departments can do a lot better at investing in the analytical capability that they have to show and make the case to the Treasury that their ideas can boost the economy.
Right.
Because it's ultimately that's sort of missing at the moment. If that analysis was being carried out to the OBR standards, and the OBR standards do need to become clearer, then public spending will become sort of much better informed in respect of what things actually boost the economy. And we don't have a lot of economic growth at the moment, and it'd be great to have a bit more of it. And government spending is very large, so directing a bit more of it at supporting economic growth is a good thing. And I think that sort of element of the paper is absolutely critical. Government departments need to get better at doing this stuff.
And there was a mission, none of the word dropped out of fashion, about working across departments, because your paper, looking at the life sciences, quite rightly shows to a newbie a bewildering ecosystem of so many different departments and policymakers that inform life sciences. So I guess the idea of having a more cross-departmental approach to this in terms of assessing the impact economically makes sense, rather than a Treasury calculus point of view.
Completely. And to Bill's point, I mean, there is some interesting work starting to emerge. So we were quite close to an analysis linking the elective wait list with data from DWP. And so essentially making the case, which only government can do with access to some of this data, that bearing down on the NHS elective wait list would be good for the economy, because you could both keep people in work and encourage people back to work. I completely agree that more of this sort of analysis, I think, is helpful. It informs the public policy debate. And actually, we at the King's Fund have had some really interesting conversations with the OBR, where they've been in some flux in recent months, but I think they're genuinely interested. So you look at their medium and long-term forecasts, and they talk about particularly the likely increase of health spend unless we do something different. And that was at the heart of the paper we published recently. So we have seen this tripling of spend on health since the 1950s. It looks as though it may double again in the next 50 years. Now, to some degree, as countries get wealthier and we get amazing innovation, it's probably only right we'd want to spend more on some of that. But it does start to open up, I think, in public policy terms. Well, is that sustainable? Can we spend that much of our national wealth on health? If not, how do you get ahead of that curve? What do you do to keep people well? And I think it can really direct public policy decisions in a different way. So in full agreement, analytical capability, a more sophisticated cross-departmental conversation.
Maybe something for the new cabinet secretary to start pushing us gender right in a very, very busy in-tray. And there is precedent for this, isn't there, Bill? Regarding, I think it was Jeremy Hunt made the case with the OBR in the sense of the extra spending on childcare having an economic impact. So it's not a complete leap of faith.
No, not at all. And yeah, I mean, there is a healthy debate going along in fiscal policy circles about whether the OBR should be doing this anyway. But let's not disappear down that rabbit hole.
You can come back again for another podcast on that, Bill. No
It's
worry.
not my area.
He loves to talk
It's not
about
my
that.
area of expertise. But yeah, no, they did. And Jeremy, credit to him as Chancellor, pushed a lot of this.
Yeah.
And Maria mentioned talking therapies earlier on. That was an example of an intervention which was scored. The childcare stuff you mentioned. The Labour government's planning reforms have been positively scored in the jargon by the OBR. And of course, the act of doing this makes it easier for the government to spend and invest political capital in these areas because there's a predicted return in respect of economic growth. And when you're spending money on healthcare interventions, if you grow the economy, they sort of become cheaper in like weird sort of Alice in Wonderland public accounting terms. So it makes spending on things that we'd want easier. That's the dynamic at play here, and it has been done before. And I think with further investment by government departments in the analytical capability, and of course work by the life sciences sector. The life sciences sector has these big research budgets, as we've heard. Like, there are external parties who can invest in research to prove a link between healthcare interventions and economic growth. And all of that is going to be positive for society and the economy.
Absolutely. One final point on the discussion paper that you just hinted at there. Better criteria, obviously evidence that we talked about, and allowing, despite the fact that it might be a bit of a fiefdom, third parties. I think one of your previous roles at Boehringer was global head of diversity. And I think once you're on record as saying having diverse views might be quite healthy for that decision-making process.
No, definitely. I mean, to your point, that's what the paper is bringing, healthy returns. It's really about creating that changing mindset. And it's a call asking everyone to sit on the table and look at which types of criteria that assess the relationship between health and welfare could we create in order to enable the industry, the different governments, NHS, NICE, Treasury, to work together to enable that to happen. And I tell you, the industry would be happy to, for instance, to create evidence if we have a defined criteria about that correlation that benefit the UK economically. We would be happy to include that criteria in our assessment. So I think that would be the key, if we could join forces and to support each other. That's where I think the diversity of thinking could help, where we bring life sciences and the farm industry and together with the government to make it happen.
Okay, it's a great picture, it's a great vision. We hopefully will see that happen. I wanted to end, if I may. I think the case is clear. I mean, the idea that the life sciences and healthcare can drive economic growth is there. It's definitely a policy aim. How and why we've touched upon collaboration, clearer evidence, criteria. I think we've also painted the picture of if this doesn't happen, we could see capital flight and investment going the wrong way. But I wanted to end on a positive note, if I can. Paint a picture, each of you, just briefly, of what this might promise in reality to patients and providers and policymakers if the 2035 vision becomes a reality and the UK indeed becomes the third most important place for life sciences. in the world. What will that mean for policymakers here and indeed patients, which is the most important cohort?
Can I start with patients?
Please.
Because, I worked in cancer care for many years.
course.
And so I have observed the absolutely fantastic innovation over the past couple of decades, which has been totally transformative in some cancers. You can begin to see the prospect of this in dementia, in other disease areas. And so I think the prospect of an environment, I mean, of course, there's a limit on what we can spend as a country, and that goes without saying. And so you have to make choices. But the prospect of, a system firing on all cylinders where there's particularly equal access and adoption and spread, because often you find if you live close to a research active a hospital or centre, you might have slightly easier access to some of the latest innovative clinical trials or treatments. So an NHS that really is ensuring, against strict criteria, but breakthrough innovations get to patients quickly, I think is game-changing. And I think allied with that, a really healthy, thriving life science sector. We do have this brilliant basic science base, and to build on that can only be a good thing.
I won't repeat everything about pay, but I agree with everything. If you have a strong life sciences sector and an NHS delivering equitable access, then only it's patients who benefit ultimately. To have that strong life sciences sector, we do need for the Treasury to feel a bit more instinctively that this is a sector that they need to support. The Treasury's got a very, very hard job because there's not much money. So if we can make it easier for them to unlock funding, then that's good for the life sciences sector, good for patients, as Sarah mentioned, and it's good for the economy because we'll end up with better jobs, more jobs, higher paid jobs spread all over the country. And I think this debate we're having about how the OBR can better assess the benefits of spending on healthcare and spending on life sciences is absolutely critical to getting the Treasury on side. And that fixes one of the challenges that the life sciences sector has in respect of public policy. So if we fix it, then there's a great world of economic growth and better patient care.
It's a great vision. I'm going to give you the last word. Maria, you've voted with your feet. You've moved to the country a few months ago with decades of experience. So that prospect, I guess, from Boehringer Ingelheim's perspective, is something that you very much believe in.
No, for sure. It is my passion as well. And all I can say is that the company has a clear purpose. It's transforming lives in the long term. And lives means patients, means caregivers, patients in underserved communities, like you mentioned, which I think it's also very important, is our patients. Yeah? So we are here committed to invest in the UK, and we hope we can get a good partnership to make it happen for the benefit of all UK patients.
Well, that's a bit of good economic headlines for the government if we can make that a reality. Maria, Bill, Sarah, thank you so much for your time and wisdom today. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. If you've enjoyed this episode of Voices of Care, please like, follow, or subscribe wherever you receive your podcasts. And if you want to learn more about how we're turning the debate on health, life sciences, and social care, please visit voicesofcare.com. In the meantime, I'm Suhail Mirza. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. I think that's what we call a wrap.
Voices